Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Interest Timeout. My name is Ed Rogers, and I am your narrator for today's subject that we get into to kind of give you a prelude to what a little bit I've been thinking about. Let me just change a couple of things here quickly, and let's get rid of that. Back in many years ago, I had the unfortunate situation where I had to let someone go that was on a team that I was leading. And this person, I won't go into details about why I had to get rid of them, but they just didn't mesh well with the team. And in my attempt to try and share my sadness at having to let a team member go, I communicated to this person by telling another story of a situation where I had to let someone go in a team because they had they suffered from alcoholism. And in that situation, I kind of explained that I felt bad about this person getting rid of them because they had alcoholism, and I give them multiple warnings, but they cannot do their job when they're under the influence. And so they understood, and it was a very sad event. And indeed, the entire place where I worked was devastated at that situation because this person had long tenure with the company, and they were just a few years away from retirement. And so they basically, we opted on an early retirement option for this individual. So I was explaining that I was sort of referencing that previous event to this other person to communicate to them using digital means, meaning email messages, because phone conferences and phone calls back in those years were quite expensive. So I wrote everything down very carefully in an email, sent it. Got a reply a few hours later, very upset, thinking that you're calling me an alcoholic. And that's not what I was doing at all. So this kind of leads in a little bit to what I wanted to talk about today, and a subject that I feel is quite useful for us to take a look at, and hopefully it'll make your life a little bit better. Again, welcome to Interest Timeout. All right, the subject that we're going to get into today, and I'll just bring that up here on the computer in just a moment, is why we misunderstand each other. So to kind of set the stage here, and this is probably a topic that many of you have experienced, is that it's 8 p.m., maybe 9 p.m. at night. You're maybe watching your favorite show, listening to your favorite music. You're relaxing. You're getting ready to go to bed because you know that you have a work day starting in the morning. And you normally start to work around 8 o'clock in the morning. But you get a notification on your phone, and that the next morning at 7 a.m., you got a meeting invite with your boss for the next morning at 7 a.m. with only no explanation at all other than the heading for this meeting request is, quote unquote, discuss your work. Now, what would you be thinking in this initial reaction to this situation? Would you be thinking, wow, I'm in trouble. What went wrong? Because this is so vague. It's so much in lacking in proper communication tactics, is that it could mean anything. But because it's psychologically or survival instinct is going to bring up the wildest, craziest, most disastrous story immediately. And then you start thinking about it a bit more. And then the more you think about it, it either gets worse, or you kind of say, oh, everything will be okay. Or you start panicking and say, well, I don't want a meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning. I want to call my boss right now, but it's outside business hours. And that may not be appropriate in that situation. Now, the reality could be very, very different than what you think. Your manager may have just received some great news. And at the end of the day, and they just can't wait to share it with you. And they didn't want to bother you in the evening, and they decided to do it in the morning. However, their digital body language is saying something very different to you. When we think about this as well, is that when we think about 50% of the time, the tone in our emails is misunderstood. Because when something isn't clear, we fill in the gaps emotionally and we tell ourselves a clever story. And in that story, we're sometimes the victim, the other person's the villain, or we're helpless to do anything about it. Misunderstandings happen often through these email messages. Now, this was according to the Journal of Psychology and was a Journal of Personality and Psychology. Is that this is something that I read and it was very interesting. So let's go ahead and get started and take a look at some graphics to support what I'm talking about. Okay, let's change to this. Let's go ahead and put this here. Now, kind of the title of this video is kind of the hidden problem behind emails, text, meetings, and relationships and the way we communicate with each other. And this is all encompassing. So this is like work, this is family, this is society, communities, everything. So anyway, now getting back to the email story, have we ever sent an email that in our mind was perfectly clear, only to receive a response that made you wonder if that other person had read an entirely different message? They're what they understand. There was actually, I remember in Facebook many years ago, there was a graphic that someone shared on their profile. I don't remember who shared it. Just a few words, and it says, "I am responsible for what I say," or in this case, write in an email message. "But I am not responsible for how you understand it. You are." So that got me thinking. I mean, that is one way of looking at it, which I think limits our experience. But are we truly responsible for what we say and how we say it? Yes, we are. Are we responsible for when we receive a message to try to understand what the person might be trying to say and what the message really is, rather than our initial reaction to it? Yeah, we are. The responsibility goes both ways. And the lack of responding to that creates what we call a discontinuity point, where you just don't really have that flow that exists between individuals or within an organization even. So anyway, you kind of wonder in those situations that people just sometimes wonder, what are they reading? Are they reading the same message that I sent? Let's consider another situation. Let's say you got a text message, and by that text message, or even an emoji, you immediately felt annoyed or offended or confused. Okay? So this is something that happens to all of us. We discover later that the sender didn't mean anything bad at all. They were trying to be very positive and fun even. But often very much in many of these cases, we do not understand what they're sending. Okay. So if you've experienced that, and I think all of us has, you're not alone. Now, with research and experience on this, and I will not go into all of the research because I don't want to bore you with it, but I've discovered over many years of working with people and working in my own situations as well, that research and experience consistently show that communication is far less accurate than most of us think. In fact, some studies suggest that when communication occurs only through text, our understanding of the sender's intended meaning can drop dramatically. Think about that. You carefully choose your words, put some thought into it. You write your email, you read it 2 or 3, 4 times, and then you press send. And yet the person receiving it may interpret your message completely differently than you intended. Why? Why are human beings so bad at understanding one another? And why does it seem to be getting worse in our digital age? I'm going to explore this with you today. And I hope that this is probably maybe one of our biggest hidden challenges facing modern relationships today in our workplaces, in our leadership teams, our families, and our communities. The combination of ambiguity and digital communication. All right, let's take a look at this next graphic. Now, one of the greatest misconceptions that we have is believing that communication has occurred simply because words are being exchanged. Communication is not, just a second here. Yep. Okay. I'm making sure I'm on the right graphic. Yes, I am. Okay. Communication has occurred just because words are being exchanged. Now, it's not just being measured by what was said, but communication is measured by what was understood. Okay. Now, those are not the same thing. I can speak clearly. You can listen carefully. And yet, we can walk away with completely different understandings. In leadership and in families, this is horribly devastating, especially in families. Dreading that holiday get-together when you get together with the family. You don't see each other very often, and you're waiting for the bomb to go off. No, not literally, but you're waiting for someone's feelings to get hurt, and then it gets out of control, and everyone's sorry, and then people leave with a kind of a bad feeling that, gosh, this was another holiday that was wasted. In marriages, for example, this is horribly painful because when trust is high, you often take people for granted. And sometimes they may not be on the same or synchronized or same wavelength as you are. And even though you love each other and you're fantastic as a couple and things like that, a poorly worded phrase or lack of words that you should say can really make a difference. In organizations and around the world, this type of miscommunication is horribly expensive. And in society, this creates division as well. Now, the problem isn't necessarily that people are evil or malicious. Now, I do know that there are people out there that are evil and malicious. The problem is that people are constantly interpreting. Human beings are meaning-making machines. Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. Maybe I should try to find a graphic for that one day. We don't just simply hear words. We attach stories, connections to emotions, assumptions, experiences, expectations, and beliefs to those words. And that's where misunderstandings begin. So, when we think about the missing 93%, as we see on this graphic, many people have heard the claim that communication is mostly nonverbal. Interesting. There is truth to that. When we think about what is needed for effective communication, depending on the research that what you believe in, the exact percentages are often debated about. And I remember watching one television show, and there was a social psychologist that was talking about a study that was related to this as well. And it said that 27% of what we need for effective communication is only communicated in words. The funny thing is about words is that our brain stores things as images. And we, as a sender of a message, cannot understand fully how every word that we say is forming those images in their mind. For example, if I tell you not to think of the pink elephant, you're going to think about the pink elephant. But the feelings and the annoyance or other thoughts that come into your mind as a result of that, I cannot control. But we can if we are mindful enough to watch for that. Now, like I said, even though I said the missing 93%, the larger point does remain true about percentages, though. When we're face-to-face, we rely far more on words. If you think, for example, about the majority of what we need, 27% in one study said that it is the words themselves. And above that, and connected to that, and added to that, is the tone of the words that we are using. If you're reading words in an email, you're going to hear a tone. Depending on your own mental state when you read those words, then especially in a small instant message that was sent to you or an email message, then you're going to infer or add in feeling and tone into the words that you are reading based on your own mood or how you feel about that person when you read it. Okay. So we rely on far more than words. We have body language as well. So when we are face to face, we see people's facial expressions. And we listen, and hopefully through our own life experiences, we know about the tone of their voice. We know how to read it. Many of us do. That's called interpersonal intelligence. But in order to communicate effectively, we need a combination of multiple different intelligences. According to Howard Gardner, he talks about roughly eight and a half or 9 different intelligences. I will not present them to you today, but the ones that I think immediately come to my mind is interpersonal intelligence, which is understanding other people and their reactions. Intrapersonal intelligence, which is understanding ourselves and our own reactions and why we do what we do. Combined to that, maybe logical intelligence and verbal intelligence, and maybe other types of intelligence, even musical intelligence, can come in and play a part in how we communicate. In fact, probably all the intelligences create a kind of a kaleidoscope of color and feeling and emotion and personality that get into the mix as well as culture. So body posture has a lot of things that we look for that. We look how body is and what the body is telling us. What's the facial expressions that what's that message being sent to us? We look for eye contact. Okay. We look at or listen for and watch for pacing. Is a person speaking out of their stomach? Or are they speaking way up here, up to here? Do they have control over their voice when it's way up here? No. I remember when I went to the university many years ago, my speech professor talked about this. He said, we need to get our voice slowed down into our stomachs where we have control over it. Interesting. Anyway, so pacing is important. Energy, the amount of energy that we put into it. I've actually, in my coaching experiences, when I've coached people say, Ed, you have way too much energy. Can't handle it. I'm a shy person. Your energy is just way too much for me. I'm sorry. I can't work with you. So sometimes I have to learn how to tone down my energy to show less energy to people. I am a sender. I send energy to people. Much like in the videos that I'm doing with you right now, I'm trying to send energy to you. Do you receive it? Do you not receive it? Do you react positively to it, negative to it, or does nothing to you? Emotion has a lot to do with it as well. People watch for that. They infer emotion in messages. Context is important as well. So these signals help us to determine meaning. Okay, remember we are humans are meaning machines. So if meaning is not provided in communication, we will create it ourselves as we try to understand a communication or even have a discussion with someone. For example, let's say that someone says, that's interesting. Did they really mean that? Did they really mean that's brilliant? Or are they thinking that's ridiculous? So you don't really know. In some cultures, you could say that, let's have tea together sometime. Let's go out for a coffee. Let's have a meal together sometime, whatever the situation might be. Let's go out to lunch together during the workday. So, do they really mean it? Or is it just a cultural norm? Okay. Now, ridiculous, brilliant, interesting could be in one person's mind that these words are identical to one another. The tone of our communication changes everything. For thousands of years, human communication evolved in physical environments, not digital. Think about that. More, even 40, 50 years ago, how we communicated with each other, even remotely, has changed dramatically, over in such a short period of time. And we as human beings are behind the curve. Is that when you think about the complexity of how we communicate as a line, let's say up to this level, are we at that line? In the sense, are we able to handle that complexity of communication in the digital age? Or are we above it, or below it, or way below it? Something to think about. We are designed as human beings to read each other's faces. We are designed to hear each other's voices. We are designed to observe behavior and dynamics of behavior, which are behavior is activities that are seen or measured, right? So when we're observing behavior, we develop a dynamic of behavior or an idea of a person, who they are, by seeing a consistency in their behavior over time. Now, suddenly, when we think about over the last few decades, within just the last few decades, much the way we communication has moved and changed to computer screens, phone screens, and tablet screens, emails, text messages, chats, social media, collaboration platforms like Teams or something else, back in the old days when we were using Lotus Notes. And something important in that process of learning how to work in the digital workspace, something important disappeared. Guess what it was? Digital body language. Now, there's a wonderful book that I've read, and I encourage you to take a look at it. A wonderful lady who's done a lot of research on this subject. Her name is Erica Dewan, and she's written a book called Digital Body Language. I encourage you, if you want to go into it deeply and learn from it and make your life a little bit better on how you communicate with people digitally, her book is the one that I encourage you to read. Maybe I'll put a link to it there, or you can just look for it on Amazon. Anyway. Now, digital body language is body language that you use in the digital space when you communicate and interact via email, in chat, or in meetings. And it's the way that you communicate, convey, and project your attitude, your intentions, and expectations in the digital workspace. In the physical world, body language is obvious. In the digital world, it often does become invisible, but yet it still exists and it is necessary. For example, how quickly somebody responds to a message that you send is very important to many people, or whether they even respond at all. The length of their message is important. Is it too short, or is it too long, or is it just right? Kind of like Goldilocks in the Three Bears, right? The porridge is either too cold or too hot, or it's just right. Their punctuation, for those of you who like grammar, a person doesn't spell things right, or they have word order errors or grammar errors or punctuation errors. Even a period in the wrong spot could change the meaning of a sentence. And some people follow it with an emoji like a smiley face at the end of a sentence. Does that mean, do we take it seriously or not? Or does it mean that you are actually just trying to be pleasant as you write that? Is that sometimes you might write a sentence and when you read it, like, they might misunderstand it. I'll put a smiley face on the end of that sentence so they don't take it too seriously. I'm not mad at them. I'm not upset with them. So the emoji you think is a way of doing it, but then they might think, this person's joking. They really don't mean what they say. And then you ignore it. Okay. There are also the way you format your message. If you have multiple little sentences in a list, is it all put together as one huge paragraph? The choice of the words that they are using, especially in our international world that we live in, is that many people do not speak English in the world. The majority of the world does not use English as their mother tongue. It's their second, third, or even fourth or fifth language. We have to be aware of that. Okay. How we use emojis, how other people use emojis, even the timing of a reply is very, very important to people. All of these become forms of digital body language. The challenge is that digital body language is far harder to interpret accurately than physical body language. And when that interpretation becomes difficult, Guess what happens? Assumptions begin to take over. Now, when we think about the dangers of assumptions, imagine that you send an email. A few hours later, you get a response. 2 words. And the 2 words in that email are fine, period, proceed, period. Fine, period, proceed, period. It's basically saying fine, proceed. That's the way I would interpret it. That's it. That's all they said. No greeting, no explanation, no smiley face, no declaration of intent or feeling when they were writing this, no enthusiasm, no context. When we think about even in that situation, fine, proceed, what story begins to immediately start playing in our head? Just like, let's meet at 7 o'clock in the morning and talk about your work. You're going to panic, right? You're not going to get any sleep. What kind of message comes into our mind here? Maybe that you might be thinking in your mind, fine, proceed, they're upset. They're not feeling well. They're angry with me. They don't like my idea. They're frustrated with me. And whatever negative emotion we could put into that. But what if the sender was just simply busy and they wanted to let you know, thumbs up, it's good, let's do that. Even today, when people send reactions to emails, you normally don't get, you have to look it up in a different area. Like, somebody had a reaction to your email. What? What's a reaction? When Microsoft Teams started doing that, especially with Outlook, I was like, what? What does this mean? Okay. So fine, proceed might be that the person's just too busy to write anything else. What if they're writing from an airport or sending a quick message from their phone before the plane leaves? What if they are typing on a phone? What if they were just trying to be efficient and try to get to the heart of the matter without trying to small talk or put in any unnecessary words that are unnecessary? It's like, okay, fine, let's do it like this. You know, we don't know that. The message hasn't changed in this situation. Fine, proceed. Only the interpretation of it. And that's where communication often breaks down. Not because of what was said, but because what was assumed. So, connection to this, let's take a look at what we call the ambiguity trap. Unclear trap. Let's say that word today. Anyway, ambiguity. Help me out here. Anyway, this brings us to another hidden enemy of communication, and it's ambiguity. There we go. Ambiguity occurs when language can reasonably mean more than one thing. The word itself isn't clear enough to guarantee a person's understanding. And because humans naturally fill in the missing information, we often assume meanings that were never intended by the sender, for example. One example from logic involves the word star. A star in the sky means one thing. A movie star means something completely different. Same word, different meanings. Confusion occurs when we fail to recognize the shift. But ambiguity isn't limited to logic textbooks. It happens every single day. In boardrooms, in meetings, in marriages, in churches, in families, in meeting places, in public, in text message, emails, everywhere. To kind of help illustrate this a little bit, let's take a look at an ambiguity trap that we have in this little story. So this example involves a simple misunderstanding. A woman and a man are watching some runners run in a marathon and watches the one particular runner who is struggling in a hot race and says, "Wow, that runner looks really hot." She means overheated. The guy who's standing next to her, who happens to be her boyfriend, he doesn't hear overheated. He hears attractive. Okay. Conflict begins instantly because nothing malicious in her speech happened at all. She was thinking overheated. He was thinking that person is attractive or handsome. Nobody in this situation lied to the other. Nobody intended harm to the other person. The problem was ambiguity. One phrase, two different meanings, two completely different conclusions. This happens every day in professional communication. Someone says, we should revisit this. Does it mean that they want to do it next week? Next month? Never? Nobody knows. So when we think about why this happens, and getting back to our email stories that we had a little bit earlier, email is one of the most dangerous communication tools in existence because it combines two powerful problems. Number one, digital body language is missing. Second, ambiguity is everywhere. The sender believes the message is clear because they know what they meant. The sender interprets the message through their own experiences. These are not the same thing. Communication experts often refer to this as the curse of knowledge. Beautiful study. If you want to look that up, please go ahead and look on that. Curse of knowledge. It's really an interesting study. Now, once we know something, it's difficult to imagine what it's like to not know it. Like, for example, the sun is in the sky. Okay. As a result, we leave information out. We skip context that we believe everybody else knows. We assume other people understand what we're talking about here. Okay. Now, and they don't. So when we think about this, and a lot of information here on this graphic is that, we can see why emails fail and the leadership lessons that we need to take into this as well. This has enormous implications for leaders. Now, leadership does not need authority, okay, even though we often refer to leaders as people in authority. Leadership, in my best definition that I can think of, is a influencing process. If you think about good leadership, is influencing people for the common good. Okay, that's what we want, right? So when I think of leadership, that's what I'm thinking of. So many leaders think that communication means informing people. And indeed, that's part of the process. But communication actually means creating shared understanding. There is a difference. A leader can send 20 emails, hold 5 meetings, deliver 3 presentations, and still fail to communicate. Why? Because people don't leave with the same understanding. Great leaders constantly ask, what might people misunderstand? What assumptions might they make? What information am I leaving out? How can I make this clearer? The best communicators, in my opinion, aren't simply just good speakers. They are skilled clarifiers. So, to help us with this, let's take a look at the 4 questions that will help us. So, whenever you're communicating with someone digitally, try asking yourself 4 questions. What do I mean as I'm communicating? Is it clear in the text or the message that I'm giving? Then am I clear about what I mean? What might they think that I mean? If I were to send this to 5 people in my team, knowing those 5 different people, how would they receive it? Would they understand it with the same meaning that I intend them to understand it? Intention is important. And if you aren't communicating what that intention is, then they're going to fill it up with assumptions. Okay, so it's important for us when we're writing a message to do a few things. Make it clear about how we feel when we write this message, if it's appropriate in that situation, what our intention is, and what we expect them to do as a result of reading that message. What's our expectations? Okay. Another question we want to think about is, what context am I assuming that they already know? So context is important. What questions might they still have? We might need to try and prepare some thinking about that. Is that, well, this is how, do they have enough information, or do they understand enough of the context of what I'm talking about here? Do I want them to have questions? Do I expect them to have questions? And if so, how should they ask those questions? Do they just reply to me, or we just save it for a meeting? Those 4 questions alone can help eliminate countless misunderstandings and change our communication style with a little bit of extra effort. I love the statement that was said many years ago. It's better to prepare and prevent than to repair and repent. Or well begun is half done. If we take that extra few seconds to make sure that we are doing this and think of those 4 questions, it will help us. Another thing we're going to think about is assuming positive intent. So one of the most powerful principles of digital communication is this: assuming positive intent. Most understandings don't occur because people are trying to offend us. Remember that. In a normal, everyday environment, unless we're working with narcissistic psychopaths, then we don't need to worry about this. People are not out there to destroy us, okay? They're just trying to communicate, and we need to give them the benefit of the doubt. So these types of misunderstandings in those situations, because communication is difficult. People may have rushed in message and not thought it through before they press send. They may have written it when they're extremely tired, when they first woke up in the morning before they had their morning coffee. The text may have been poorly worded. The message may have lacked context. Before coming offended, become curious. If you're unsure of the message, thinking that, well, this person is upset with me, they don't like me, clarify it with a nice question, with respect. Seek that clarification. Replace assumptions that you or might be having with an attempt to try and understand. Now, let's take a look at the part of our psychology, which is really the real issue. The deeper issue is not technology, it's human nature, which we are meaning-making creatures. We fill in the gaps. We jump to conclusions. We assume, we infer, we interpret, and often we do so without even realizing it. Technology simply amplifies the problem by removing many of the signals that once helped us interpret accurately. Now, let's consider what we need to do that. On the other half of this graphic, on the right-hand side, is finding your voice. The encouraging news is that digital communication can improve. And we as human beings love to learn and improve ourselves, right? At least I hope we do. In fact, because digital communication is much more intentional than we give credit for, we can often improve it faster than we can, to make it faster like a good face-to-face communication. We can choose our words more carefully. We can add context to what we're saying. We can clarify our expectations and perhaps theirs as well. We can ask better questions. We can slow down before hitting send. And most importantly, we can remember that understanding is more important than being right. Now, in conclusion, the next time someone misunderstands your attempt at communication in the digital workspace or digital life space, and the next time that a text message creates confusion in you or others, and the next time a meeting ends with everybody walking away with different ideas and interpretations about what went on, remember this: communication is not about transmitting words. It's about creating mental networking with each other and meaning and creating understanding, listening to learn. The challenge isn't simply what we say, it's what others hear. And in a world of increasingly dominated by the screens that we watch, even this video, and the messages and the emails and the digital conversations that we have, learning the language behind the language may become one of the most important skills we can develop, because clarity creates trust. Trust creates connection and psychological safety. And connection and psychological safety is what allows people to learn, lead, grow, and work together. And perhaps that's something worth taking an interest into. Something that hopefully in this interest timeout, something that will help you to be better in your life. Something to think about. Thank you for watching, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everyone.